It's alive!
How do we know she is alive?
I hate when people talk during the movie.
No wire hangers ever!
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
Your stupid minds! Stupid! Stupid!
Fresh meat. Doing the intro this time.
You don't normally?
Nightmare Alley, the courageous story of one man's mission to systematically fuck up the life of every single person he locks eyes with.
Oh, we're just jumping straight
Just
into
jumping
it today.
straight fucking into it. I mean, most of them are carny folk, so whether or not they actually count as people.
Rude.
You said I wasn't allowed to say certain things, but you said it was absolutely fine to make fun of carny folk, which I'm taking as a golden ticket.
It's not exactly
to spend
what I
the
meant.
entire episode
Maybe you shouldn't.
ragging on carny folk. Are you worried we're going to isolate all of our carny listenership? All three of them?
No, but I feel bad for carnival folk. A lot of the time, like P.T. Barnum, they were used exploitatively.
The ones who used to like electrocute elephants and shit.
Yeah, but like the people who were indentured under them.
Indentured servants, is that a thing? Is that
They were
I always wonder
a
whether
lot
or
of
not
people were mistreated.
maybe this is the British child inside of me. That sounded very strange. Maybe I didn't mean to say it like, stop looking at me. Maybe it's the Brit inside of me, but I just don't know enough about carny folks because there isn't much of a carny culture to Britain. We have we specifically have one regular carn, but I think our carnies are like chavs. Like our carnies. What?
I mean,
how many people?
They're pretty chavvy, I would say, as a whole.
How many subgroups can I offend immediately within the first minute and a half of the podcast?
But those kind of carnivals were legal back then. It's things like that tend to be exploitative now. I'm sure there are like carnival themes going around.
Rules and regulations.
Fine, yeah, but they've got to be regulated now.
Well, I wonder how many like authentically dangerous like old school carnivals still exist in the world. Like not like dangerous, but you know those ones where you like see videos of like those. They're always like painted with like.
I think it depends
neon...
what country you're in.
No, but I see like ones like the Hoppins in England. You see them and they're like hanging on by shoestrings, and like the bolts are flying off as like the fucking Ferris wheel goes round, and you can look at it and you think, right. I'm aware. I've worked in enough industries to know that health and safety regulations are more extensive than what you're doing for this. So there must be some legalities.
Yeah, they'll have to do checks on them like every year, maintain the equipment, upkeep.
There we go. And you learn something new every single day. Well,
not necessarily interesting things, but Liam likes to go on.
I think people will be interested to know my opinions on the carny folk. I like carnies. I think carnies are the bread and butter of most American societies. The salt of the earth, if you will.
Diametrically opposed to what you were saying 5 minutes ago. Do we want to talk about Nightmare Alley?
Do we want to talk about Nightmare Alley? Let's get into the film we are talking about today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bad Taste Buds Fresh Meat, the Bad Taste Buds sideshow where we talk about the latest cinematic releases straight from your phone. I don't know. I've not came up with a regular opening for this one yet, but I think that'll do.
You suck.
I don't suck. I'm really excited. I'm like up a height because I'm going to talk about a film that I fucking love. Let's get into Nightmare Alley a little bit, and let's start with a non-spoilery segment. Non-spoilery for those people who, and I would recommend it, want to go see Nightmare Alley. Nightmare Alley is the latest effort from Mexican filmmaker Guillermo del Toro, a personal favorite of mine, I know a personal favorite of yours as well. I think a lot of people in the West kind of started to become aware of his work through Pan's Labyrinth, but I was actually way before that. I remember being a little spooky ghost child, being well into my haunted house films, and absolutely falling in love with Devil's Backbone. And that was my introduction anyway. And then all you normies were like, all you posers, once Pan's Labyrinth came out, I was like, oh my God, who's this guy? And I'm like, yeah, I was already there like five years ago. And then there's like the super posers who were like into Kronos, like even well before that. Like my sister, I remember she was a bit of a poser and she was really into Kronos.
Pan's Labyrinth was my start.
Pan's Labyrinth is fucking wonderful. Like what a film that is like not only overplayed and over kind of talked about in the public stream of consciousness and yet lives up to every single moment of hype. Like, you can't really overhype Pan's Labyrinth, can you? Even today, like, if I was going to sit down and watch it, I would be glued to that screen. Now, it's not to say the guy is flawless. I remember being like, there's a couple of films in his catalog that I'm not a massive fan of. Like, let's go through them. Which of the Guillermo del Toro films do you like? We both like the Hellboy films, both of them. Yeah. Correct? Like, I think they're very underrated
I like
films.
the second one more than the first
Second
one.
one's fucking amazing. Golden Army for the win. Pacific Rim, he did the first Pacific Rim, I believe, which is...
I'm not as into big robots as you are.
Well, it's not just big robots, Ryan. It's big kaijus as well.
Kaijus as well.
I really enjoy Pacific Rim. I think it's a dumb fucking movie, but I think it's a really fun, dumb fucking movie. We also have other efforts. So, yeah, we've seen Devil's Backbone, which we both adore.
Obviously.
One of the saddest fucking movies I've ever seen. He did Blade and Blade 2, which I think we've both seen, I think. I'm looking at you.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That is new information to me.
He's had his little forays into the mainstream as well. Like,
At least he didn't do Blade 3.
Right? I don't know who did that. I feel like in my head, everyone who does like part 3s of superhero movies, it's always Brett Ratner. And I don't know why, because I know he did X-Men 3 and ruined that
Let's just let them
franchise.
fade into obscurity.
He did Mimic, which I think is a pretty unknown Western kind of... It's not great. It's just like sci-fi schlocky, like Species, like those kind of films, those direct-to-DVD films that you kind of don't expect too much from.
Pass.
Let's talk about his most recent kind of success anyway. He's had a lot of success in Hollywood, but most recently Shape of Water was the one that brought him really the furthest into the mainstream that he's been. Obviously with the Oscar win, it won Best Picture, it won Best Director. That's probably his crowning achievement to this day. And I know we both saw that in the cinema.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you remember of it, but it's kind of wonderful.
I remember everything but the details.
That's fair. I mean, you don't remember details of like,
anything, pretty much.
Yeah, so that's to be expected. But she fucks a fish.
I remember that. I remember the set pieces. I remember what everyone looked like. I still remember exactly the narrative.
I actually think Shape of Water kind of leads nicely into the film we're going to talk about today because he clearly has a love for old Hollywood. Like, he adores that kind of film noir aesthetic.
Yeah, that's something else I remember from Shape of Water.
Old classic Hollywood. There's even that beautiful scene, that like 1930s throwback scene where it's all black and white and she's having like one of those, the main woman and the fish man are doing this beautiful choreographed dance. That's all these 1930s aesthetic.
Even smaller examples, like in this that we just watched, it has that fade out on the screen where the black starts coming in from the edges and like circles in on someone's face. And I just love that. Such a cute touch.
The guy is such a geek for old Hollywood. It's really cute to watch and kind of beautiful to see him getting to relive his movie fantasies on the big screen and be able to make films like Nightmare Alley, which is another Guillermo del Toro masterpiece for me.
Yeah,
he smashes it here. There's only one film in his catalog that I abjectly hate, and it's a film called Crimson Peak. And I don't know if you saw this with me, but I fucking hate Crimson Peak.
I have no idea what happened in that film. I was so confused and lost by the end of it. I gave up.
Crimson Peak feels like someone pretending to be Tim Burton, but like someone who's never made a movie pretending to be Tim Burton. And I remember watching it, I was like, this is not the Guillermo I know. Yeah, this is a return to form for me. This is an absolute abject smash that I think has a few flaws that we will get into, but ultimately it's another lovingly lavish throwback to the 40s. A remake of a film I've not seen called Nightmare Alley that I think, again, I don't think the trajectory of the plot differs too much from the original Nightmare Alley.
I fancy watching it, even if it's just like skim through YouTube looking at different clips.
I've heard the original. A lot of people saying, even people who really love this film are saying the original Nightmare Alley is actually better. It stars Tyrone Powers and Joan Blondell, two kind of, I think, really big actors of the time who were very much into the film noir scene. And I think it's Edmund Golding, the director. So he had a lot of credits in the film noir, Dark Victory, Grand Hotel, IMDb. But yeah, he kind of, you can tell his love for this genre. It almost feels like watching a kid play with his toys, and you can see like the love he's having with it. Like, you know, when you could just get those little butterflies when you're like, this guy clearly loves what he does for a living.
Yeah.
I just think that's the element, the big takeaway that I enjoyed the most out of this is when you watch a filmmaker who clearly has a passion for his craft.
Yeah, it's very carefully and delicately crafted.
So a basic rundown of the plot. Nightmare Alley follows Stan, who's kind of like a grifter. He's a man of a troubled past, without going too much into spoiler territory. He runs across this carnival run by Willem Dafoe, and he quickly kind of integrates himself into the carny folk because he has a unusual talent for, and what was the word they use? Mentalism. No, that's it. And it's a big deal. And I actually have watched a few documentaries, like the little mini documentaries since, about mentalism, and it's a big industry. Like, even today, people are kind of obsessed with this idea of mentalism.
Of course it is. It's a huge thing. I'm surprised you had to Google
that.
No,
I mean, is it kind of what Darren Brown does?
Like, yeah, it's exactly what Darren Brown does. That, like, I mean, you just hate like magicians and things, so I'm not surprised this isn't on your radar.
But this film kind of made me have a new appreciation for it in a way, because
it takes a lot of intellect, a lot of preparation, circumstance.
Yeah.
But obviously, this film having Bradley Cooper, Stan is quite the charmer.
He charms his way into the bed of a young What's her talent? Just getting electrocuted.
Yeah. She's practiced being electrocuted a lot, and she lets volts pass through.
So he charms his way into the bed of a spark plug, played by Rooney Mara, called Molly, who's this kind of young upstart who kind of falls for his charms pretty much immediately. And the film is nicely segmented into 2 bits as well. Again, we are avoiding spoilers, but you will have to prepare yourself for a long movie. Not a slow movie by any stretch.
I think it's well paced. Like when we've watched things like Pig lately and Green Knight, I've came out of them feeling like
thin ice, boy.
I could have watched this at home more comfortably. It was long and it felt longer to me, despite the fact that the pacing was really good in them. Like I just didn't have the constitution, but this kept me enraptured pretty much throughout.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the way Guillermo del Toro directs his scenes, because you're almost never allowed to be bored because of just how phenomenal his direction is. And what I said when we came out, I said this is an example of a director at the top of his game. This is someone who knows his craft. He knows how to pace something kind of perfectly in this weird way. Like, it is segmented. And you almost feel like there's almost too much plot here to really cram into even into 2.5 hours. I often wonder these days, could this have been better as a TV show? And I do think this would service very well as a TV show.
Oh, it would, wouldn't it? I'd watch that.
Or at least a spin-off. I would watch a spin-off of like maybe watching what the carnival folk do afterwards. But our real focus here is Bradley Cooper's is Stan and his kind of misadventures. And we're watching a man who is, I don't want to say an abject dickhead, but he's kind of an abject dickhead. Just kind of fuck up his way into success and then into failure. And again, I don't want to go too far into what the plot's about. The acting is phenomenal. I think Bradley Cooper especially kind of knocks it out of the park. But he's kind of joined by a all-star cast. The sheer star power that's on display here. You've got Willem Dafoe, you've got Toni Collette, you've got Rooney Mara, you've got Ron Perlman, who we love so much. Again, one of my only real complaints is not having enough Ron Perlman in my film, which is like, I would complain about any film.
2.5 hours of Ron Perlman wouldn't be enough.
I'm just looking at my stack of DVDs here, and I do honestly, genuinely feel that every film would be improved with the inclusion of Ron Perlman. I'm having
Dave
a look
Made a
here.
Maze.
Dave Made a Maze. Could you imagine if he played the Minotaur in Dave Made a Maze? Would that not be immediately better?
Well, he has a mask on the entire time and has no lines. Maybe not.
I feel like he could play.
But did you forget Cate Blanchett?
No, I was getting Cate Blanchett because I feel like Cate Blanchett's a conversation all in itself.
Exactly. Yeah. She was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, obviously, as the gays.
Oh, she's a
Cate
massive.
Blanchett is a queen.
She's a massive gay advocate. The gays. And if you haven't seen that iconic interview, it's for Cinderella, I think, and it's fucking wonderful. You should, if you haven't seen it, Google Cate Blanchett Cinderella interview and just thank me later. But yes, she is a presence all in her own. She more or less plays the iconic femme fatale of any film noir. She has that Morticia Adams lighting where they light her eyes a lot. But even with the way she's introduced in this like smoky piano bar where she just keeps I think she lights up like 6 cigarettes in that space of time that we get to meet her.
But everything she does is so poised and elegant and effortless, and just like I want to be in that skin. I feel like I would just float through the air.
No, that's exactly the words that were in my head. I was about to say she just floats through every scene, doesn't she? And she's just so effervescent and just she is a gay boy's wet dream. Like it's that kind of performance.
Should be every boy's wet dream,
honestly. And you're right. Just the star power on display here is enough to recommend. Like even if this film was shit, I would be able to recommend it just because what a fucking cast. It's a bonus that the film actually ended up being phenomenal as well.
Even down to Mark Povinelli doing the Major, he was such a cute combination of surly, which less cute, but very loving as well, especially towards Rooney Mara's character. And it was so cute and cuddly all around. Like Ron Perlman was the same, where it was like, you touch my girl, I'll break your neck. But like they all love each other.
Yeah.
And what you were saying about not being allowed to be bored, all the carnival scenes, there was always something going on in the background, whether it was something on display, interesting to look at, or the carnies at work in the background, practicing their craft, their different acts.
Well, I feel like a lot of it is the staging and the way that Del Toro stages his scenes. He is so experimental. And he is so entrenched in that level of extravaganza and that level of... It is extra. It's very grandiose in its setting and in its direction, to where he experiments so much with lighting. He experiments so much with the fact that every time we're in a street, it's snowing. And it's this like abject kind of dissonance between like the dark alleyways or the geometric shapes. Like even to the abstract shapes of Dr. Ritter, Cate Blanchett's character's office, the way we're introduced to her in her doctor's office. It's like these weird geometric like... pyramid shapes almost, and it's so obtuse and kind of like garish, but so garish that it kind of comes back on itself and ends up being beautiful. This is kind of what I wanted Baz Luhrmann's Great Gatsby to look like. Like, you know how that was like overblown?
I get that, yeah.
That was like overblown and a bit like ugly.
That was over stylized.
Yeah.
This is just hyper stylized.
That's the difference. That's the difference, I think. As much as it owes to films like Double Indemnity or Long Goodbye or The Big Sleep, I also think it owes a lot to kind of Todd Browning's Freaks, which is this like seminal 1930s freak show film as well. It has one foot in the film noir films of the 40s, but I think it has the other foot in a lot of early Gothic horror, which I think Del Toro has always shown that he has this love for Gothic horror. Even down to the minutiae of the scene, down to the shadows that are cast on characters, and just the tension in a lot of scenes. There's a few scenes that are just so incredibly tense that you're just... I remember gripping you at one point. I was like,
I remember.
I am so nervous for what is about to happen here. And he doesn't let you really have a moment to catch your breath. And I think it is the sign of a master craftsman at the top of his game.
But he does it so well in my forgetful memory. I always think that he's a pure horror director and that's all he does.
Yeah.
Every time, just because it's always that kind of style and theme, even if it's not a right-out horror story.
Yeah. Oh, no,
Actually,
absolutely.
it was a love story, but in my head, I'm like, oh, it's dark. It's horror.
Well, I mean, this is what he does. He straddles the lines of genres so perfectly that you can kind of get away with saying that this has horror elements to it, but it's more than that. It's a story of redemption, or should we say lack thereof redemption. It's a story of a man with deep flaws and the hamartia that comes along with that.
I feel like a lot of his best films are where it focuses on the relationships and the people and
Yes.
the characters.
Which is gonna lead me into my one and only criticism. Because I agree with you. You're right. With your comment on the Major, on all the Carney folk have this beautiful relationship that you can see is well established and that you can see is it's heartwarming to kind of cherish those moments that we get with them, but I don't think we get enough time with the Carney folk. And the time we spend with Stan, I think ultimately we're spending the majority of the film with a deeply unlikable character. And I understand the necessity for that. I understand the purpose behind that. But I also wonder whether or not this film would be elevated, and that I think that ending would have hit harder had we had a bit more affection for Stan in the early hours of the film.
Yeah, well, quite possibly, but I don't really feel the need to like Stan to sympathize with him, yes, but I don't get those heartbreak feelings, you are correct, but I don't feel like I need them from this movie.
I feel like it would elevate it just a tad had this downfall come from a more redeemable character, from a more likable character. Now, I think we're about ready to talk spoilers, so let's just give a quick wrap up for those people who haven't seen it and want to go see it. This is a phenomenal movie. This is similar to my feelings on West Side Story, where we're watching a filmmaker who has made better films. I don't think this is Guillermo del Toro's best film. However, as far as just the level of craftsmanship on display here, this is his best directed film. This is his most experimental film, and this is his most loving film. It's a joy for the whole 2.5 hours. I honestly defy anyone who doesn't at least think that on an aesthetic level this is a masterpiece. I would allow if you maybe think the plot is not quite as tight as it could be, or the characters aren't as, but on a purely directional level, this is an unequivocal masterpiece, and I'm going to give it like a solid 9.5 out of 10. And a glowing recommendation to go see this multiple times in the cinema.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great start to 2020. I agree. Fantastic movie. I don't know if it's for everyone, but I mean, not everything's for everyone. But I'm going to give it a 9. I really enjoyed it. No, I disagree on the character needing to make us sympathize.
Well, let's get into it a little bit more.
Empathize with them.
Let's get into it, because now that we can talk, so if you haven't seen it and you want to see it and you don't want spoilers, go the fuck home now. Go to the cinema. Go order some nachos. Bring a carny with you. Go to your local carnival and pay for their ticket, because they do a lot for this country. God damn it. Let's do spoiler talk. That ending hits really hard. Let's just get the ending hits really hard. So the ending, I think, is this big moment of catharsis and hubris. It is this moment where everything that Stan has done up to that point builds to this crescendo of, yeah, you kind of got what came to you there, mate, didn't you? But also, I do feel like it was very telegraphed for a long...
from pretty much start.
Yeah.
It wasn't a hard one to read, but that didn't make much of a difference. The point was, from start to finish, You knew who Stan was. He never deviated from his character. He didn't learn anything particularly.
Who did?
But he's just kind of living a troubled life. He's playing with the deck that he's got, and he rode some highs and sunk really low.
Was that a Carney pun with the deck thing?
It wasn't meant to be, but let's talk about Xena.
Let's talk about Xena, because you know what, we didn't actually mention Toni Collette too much in the main review. We mentioned her, but she's always phenomenal. I do think she's overshadowed. Both her and Rooney Mara are slightly overshadowed by Cate Blanchett. But I don't think that's to detract anything from their performance. I just think Cate Blanchett gets more of the more screen time and more of the onuses on her character. Because I think she's almost a parallel to Stan as well. She is Stan's equal in that they're both massive bastards.
Massive bastards.
But she's just smarter about it.
So you have Molly, who represents the life that Stan should choose.
Yes.
That would be a simpler life, but it would be complete if you learn to accept it.
Yes.
And Cate Blanchett is the complete opposite of that. From start to finish, you should be able to tell nothing but destruction is waiting in that relationship.
Oh, it's pure toxicity from the beginning, isn't it? The second we're introduced to it, again, just those conventions of film noir, you can see this is danger. She is the stereotypical femme fatale.
It's telegraphed all the way through.
Yes.
Even with Xena and Pete being David Stratham.
Oh, he's great though. He's so good. He's in Grace and Frankie.
Oh, yeah, of course, in Grace and Frankie.
He's one of the
amazing.
gays.
So his character isn't in the entire movie, obviously, but he is very heartwarming. He's very nice, pleasant, amicable.
But he's also
a drunk.
And he's also a bit of a harbinger, really, isn't he? As well, he's that foreshadowing is probably the best way to put it. I think Pete is one of the biggest moments where this is the way your life could go. At every turn, Stan kind of ignores all those foreshadowing
Just from
moments.
start at the beginning, but even what I was saying, first time he meets Xena, you have Pete who eventually takes him under his wing, starts training him in the mysticism arts. But he sleeps with Xena almost immediately. She comes onto him while he's in the bath, and first time she's met him, and they just
This is why he's such a bastard.
But it's telegraphed all the way through. All the way through, he says that he's a bastard. He's no good. Same as he calls Cate Blanchett no good. He somehow forgets that she's no good somewhere along in the process. But it's never strayed away from that. It never makes you think he is more than what he is.
No, and I know, and I agree with you, and I totally agree with you. And I don't think I think you can tell this was it was an intentional choice. So I can't really fault Del Toro for making that choice. You shouldn't really complain about the movie that the director didn't want to make, but I just do feel slightly... I just wonder whether or not... And I would be interested to compare it to the 1940s version to see if Stan's a more redeemable character. I think
we should watch it and find out.
I just think better stories are told with characters who have that pathos. And I think if you're kind of rooting for a character to get that comeuppance from the moment he enters the screen, I just think there's not as much of a cathartic moment when he makes that fatal flaw, that moment of decision making that leads him down the nightmare alley.
We don't get all the way to the top of the roller coaster, but we make it quite high in the terms of how hard that plunge hits at the end.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, speaking of roller coasters, just my God, how beautiful every single time they would zoom out and do a really long, a really wide shot on the carnival. How fucking gorgeous everything is. They'd have that big silhouette.
It was beautiful. I love the rain scene where they're packing away, and it gave me Dumbo vibes with the men in the cloaks and the rain macs trotting on the tents, pulling the ropes.
Just with a lot less racism.
But Molly gave me enough innocence and heartbreak, so I didn't feel like I missed out too much.
Just Rooney Mara, man, forever being one of the most underrated actresses of our modern era. She's so fucking... She just gets that innocent, sweet, innocent farm girl.
She does, and that is a big jump from Lisbeth Salander.
She was so good as Lisbeth as well. I feel like she always gets overlooked because of how wonderful Noomi Rapace's performance is as well. But she did a fucking phenomenal Lisbeth. This is one of my favorite films so far of 2022. I know it's
very early.
It's been 24 days, but I do think this is hopefully going to be something that sticks around onto my best of list because just wow, just wow. I think it's going to get overlooked by the Oscars because I don't think it's the type of film. It's very much a genre film. It's masterful filmmaking, and I would recommend it to everyone. Anything else you want to cover before we depart?
I'll try and keep it brief because I do feel like I could talk about this one for quite a while.
Man, let's talk about
on a rewatch. I think you should watch the characters' relationships.
Yeah. Oh no,
closer.
absolutely.
I think that's one of my favorite parts in the movie is the interactions with people. I know Stan's quite telegraphed as a character. Molly is obviously easily innocent. Dr. Ritter is the femme fatale, and they read pretty obvious. But I love the way everybody interacts with each other. The things that are so obvious that people are literally shouting in Stan's face. Don't be a dickhead. Don't go too far. You're going to shit the bed. Down to when Xena does a card reading, tells him he's the hangman, and his arrogance, he flips the card thinking that he just has the power to easily change fate.
He's a grifter, man.
Without having to put any work in.
I kind of admire him a little bit, right up until the point where he starts murdering. I mean, that's pretty early, actually. It's the first thing he fucking does.
Well, it's the first thing he does.
I do
he
love
kills
that.
Stan before he gets to the
I
carnival.
love that as a mentality. The second anything doesn't go his way, he's such a petulant child that as soon as something doesn't quite go his way, he's like, I'll just kill him.
I'll just kill him. But even Pete from like early on was warning them off, saying when you start to believe the lies that you are omnipotent, that's when the problems begin.
You don't do a spook show.
And it wasn't in that obvious way of, oh yeah, I think I'm a telepath, I can know what the dead's thinking. It's that mindset of, I am more intelligent and powerful than the average man.
You know what I really, you're absolutely right though. He does have that. That's that level of arrogance that is kind of what cements his character. And I do think it would be difficult. What I'm asking for, that idea of like a character with a lot of pathos, would be hard to balance with a character with a lot of arrogance.
He has that charm as well, where he gets around the carnival and becomes a well-known figure in the community really quickly. I mean, that kind of flattery constantly can't be easy for an ego to take, especially once predisposed to inflation.
But I actually, speaking of none of what you just spoke of, I actually wanted to talk about something I really, really like. Is we didn't even talk about on the main bit that I think we should have covered. The dialects are cool as fuck. Like the way he does colloquialisms as well. The way he like integrates this 1940s slang into the whole film, where it's almost like a little bit like there are some conversations where you have to keep up. He doesn't underestimate the audience's intelligence, which I really appreciate. Like a lesser director probably would have just flattened out all that dialect. And maybe he would have kept maybe the southern drawl.
I quite like it. Makes it feel slick, like you're actually being conned throughout, because they speak fast, they speak double talk, but they also output on the show, do an accent, give the audience what they want, something sultry, something slow.
I mean, he doesn't quite talk like this, see? He's like, hey, you grease monkey, you get that wrench and you get to work on that jackhammer, see? It's not quite that. It's nuanced, and I think you can tell there's a lot of research into it. We actually haven't, weirdly enough, talked about one of my favorite performances, which was Richard Jenkins as Ezra Grindel. He's almost set up as like an antagonist towards the end, but he is menacing as fuck.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't like to run into him.
He's menacing as fuck.
He clearly gives no fucks. If he wants you dead, you're going to be dead.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But again, the big turning point where he asks to apparate. Apparate's the right word. The vision of his dead wife, and then there's this like little reveal where it's like, oh, and all those other women, I ruined their lives as well. I'm like, holy shit, this is a bad fucking man, isn't it?
Yeah, man, literally at that point, he should have bailed, went to Vegas, and just done shows wearing a mask.
I kept wondering this. I was like, right, this is the 1940s. Skipping town is not that difficult, surely, right? If you have enough money, he's already got the money from Ezra at this point. Buy a car. He has a car. Get in your fucking car and drive the fuck somewhere else. Cut your losses, leave before you get this mob boss psychopath. It's really the only way to describe him, really. It was this beautiful moment, again, with Cate Blanchett's character, where she says, the second you have men who you don't want after you, your world gets really small. And I felt that. And I felt that in the actual, like, the staging of the scenes, because what Del Toro does so fucking phenomenally is, like, any outside scene, they're always filmed really close to buildings. We don't actually get that much of a scale of how big this city is in those like later scenes, and everything's filmed so close.
All the bigger.
It makes it feel big, but I think it also has this level of claustrophobia.
Oh, the scenes themselves, but in terms of, I'm thinking of Ezra's mansion.
Yes, yeah.
And in my head, that thing is limitless. It has no end, but we're always confined. It's always tight.
If you can't tell, guys, we really like this movie, and we would like you to go see this movie, please. Thank you.
Support anything that any of these actors are in, really.
I was about to say, support anything Del Toro's made other than Crimson Peak.
Other than that.
Yeah. No, it's fucking wonderful. This is the thing. There's very little. We've kind of run the gamut as to how much we can come over this film. I think I am all out of
that's it, yeah. I'm just
juice.
spitting out dust at this point.
Yeah. Fucking loved it, man. Go see it. And thank you so much for watching. Anything else you want to add, Rye?
Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. But go see it.
Yeah.
Go keep these kinds of films alive. before we know it, it's just going to be big blockbusters and Marvel movies.
Oh, I'm glad you started dug. I keep getting so much shit for dogging on Marvel movies, but you did it.
I'm not dogging on Marvel.
You've done it this time, so
but it's Disney. Disney are taking over the cinema, and I like variants. And I pay for my cinema pass. I don't want to have to go to a second cinema.
Oh, but aren't you excited
watch
for
the
the
movie.
director's cut of Spider-Man: Homecoming? It's going to add a fourth Spider-Man. It's going to be Spider-Pig.
I would
actually
watch that.
But thank you so much for listening, guys. This has been Liam and Ryan at the Bad Taste Buds Fresh Meats. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we will see you very shortly.
Bye.